Hey there guys, today's video is all about dry cut saws and cold saws. What I want to do is show you my 4 best tips that I've come up with, hacks, whatever you want to call them, for getting the most out of your cold saw. It's one of the most useful tools I have in my shop, and I use it almost with every project because most of my projects I build out of steel, and an accurate chop saw is one of the things that makes fabrication so much easier. And the tools that go with it that I'm going to show you today will help you get the most out of your cold saw and make you more efficient, make you faster, and make production that much easier. So stay with me and I'll show you these 4 great tricks, and we'll go from there. Thanks. Alright, tip number 1 is to build a dedicated workstation for your chop saw, cold saw, or dry cut saw. One of the reasons I built this was because I was always putting my chop saw up on the bench and cutting my steel, and then I'd have to move it off and then I could weld. Or the other scenario was I was always down on the floor in the garage. I'd lay my steel out and put the chop saw, so I was always down on my hands and knees, and I was always propping up the ends of the steel if it was a long piece, and I got really tired of that. So I had this idea that I was going to build a station where I could cut long steel and incorporate rollers. So as you can see here, I've built this stand for the cold saw, and I've incorporated 2 sets of rollers. These rollers I got from a bicycle trainer that someone was giving away, so I got them for free. It allows me to do long pieces of metal, and in a production type thing where I'm cutting a bunch of legs for a table or anything else, I can just roll the metal in and make consecutive cuts, and it's a beautiful thing.
So here's a quick tour of the cold saw stand. You can see how I did the mounts.
Here you can see with a long piece of aluminum how it works. Basically you can just set your rollers on. I'm sure if you've tried to do a long piece of steel, you're always trying to level it with the table or propping it up on the ground with a piece at the other end, trying to get it so that it will be even with the machine so you make a nice 90-degree cut. Well, this allows me to keep always at 90 degrees to my vise and be able to just roll it in. Because what I always found was I would prop up one end of the steel, and every time I slid it, the thing that I propped it up with would fall over. I'd have to reposition. I'd spend my time going back, propping it up, and it was just a pain. So that's the reason I built this. That way, when I need it, it's ready to go. I built it folding so that I have this kind of tool to use when I want to use my cold saw, but when I don't need it, I can fold it up, stack it in the corner of the garage up against the wall, and it only takes up about 6 inches. So that's the beauty of a dedicated workstation, and let's get on to tip number 2.
Okay, so tip number 2 is building accurate setup squares for your most common miter cuts on a cold saw. The ones I use mostly are 90 degrees and 45 degrees. One of the biggest drawbacks to cold saws is that the vices are usually fairly sloppy and inaccurate, and the scale that's on the back doesn't line up very accurately. So you're always trying to set the thing up and make sure it's cutting a true 45 is very rare. Usually what I end up doing is setting it up for a 45 and then making a sample cut and then readjusting until I get it set for a perfect 45. That way I get accurate miter joints for doing square frames and things like that. So here I've got the vise all set up for a 45-degree cut as per the scale on the vise, and I'm getting ready to do a sample cut. I've got my piece clamped down, and I'm going to cut a 45 and check it for true 45 degrees alignment. So as you can see, I've finished my cut, and I'm going to check it for its alignment now to see if it's a true 45. And as almost every time I've tried to do this, the reason I came up with this idea is that it's about 1 degree off, which isn't that big of a deal, but when I want to make accurate miter cuts for square projects, I want it to be square. So I want a true 45. In this case, I have to readjust the vise and take another sample cut until I get it exactly 45 degrees. So here I've readjusted the vise, and I'm going to go for a second sample cut just to see if I'm at 45 degrees. So here I'm just checking the 45 degree angle, make sure it lines up, and this time I've got it, which is pretty good for, usually it takes me 2-3 times to get it lined up. So now that I have it at 45 degrees just exactly, I take a piece of flat stock and clamp it in the vise at just the right length, and I tighten it down so it's up against the fence or the back of the vise. I now take my 1-inch square tubing and hold it up against the piece of flat stock and tack it in place with my welder. This way I hold it tight against the side of the frame, and it turns it into a perfect 45 square for realignment anytime I want a 45 degree alignment on my vise without having to do sample cuts. Once I get it held in place, I have it all lined and where I want it, and then I tack it so that I can take it back out and finish the welds. I get it all welded, I put it back in and check the alignment and make sure that nothing moved after I welded it. Sometimes, as you know, if you've welded a lot, things move. That's why you tack it in 2 different places and make sure that it's going to stay in place. This time it worked perfectly and no movement. It stayed aligned, and I'm just going to check it by clamping it and make sure there's no gap on the side of the frame. Alright, now that I finished the 45 degree square, I went ahead and welded up my 90 degree square, and now I'm just realigning my vise, and you can see how quick this is. It used to take me a long time. I'd have to make sample cuts to do my 90 degree realignment, and you can see here that it takes just a moment. I line up my square in the vise and line it up with the side, align it to the square, and very simply I'm back to square, and I don't have to do any sample cuts. It saves me steel, saves me time, and it's a great tool for setting up your vise. Okay, on to tip number 3. Wax for your saw blade. This is probably one of the greatest money savers I have found for dry cut blades or cold saw blades. This stuff is amazing. I have to say that it has paid for itself many times over for what it does. All it is just a wax lubricant that goes on the cutting edge and on the sides, And this stuff is amazing. It makes the cuts a lot cooler, it makes your teeth last a lot longer, and it has paid for probably 2 to 3 blades by saving me. The best I've got out of one of these blades is a little over 2 years, and I use my cold saw a lot. And this thing, I'll show you at the end of this, once I do a cut, I'll show you what a difference it makes in the difference in just heat and sparks. If you want to get the most out of one of your cold saw blades, this is one of the greatest ways to do it. Buy some of this blade wax and wax your blade about I do it probably every 10 to 12 cuts. It's amazing stuff. This is the wax that I use. It's by a company called CRL. You can get it on Amazon. I think if I remember right, it was about $19 or $20. It's pretty easy to find. If you just put in tube wax lubricant or saw wax, you should be able to find it. Okay, I'm going to show both cuts, without wax and with wax. First one is without wax, second one is with. Pay close attention to the amount of sparks and noise. As you can see, there's a big difference in sound and sparks. It definitely makes a huge difference in blade life, and it's definitely worthwhile. Okay, on with tip number 4. Okay, tip number 4 is adding a line laser for blade alignment on the side of my chop saw. So whenever you're going to make a cut, a lot of times you have to just pull the blade down and try and see if it lines up with your scribed line. And this has always kind of annoyed me. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So I decided to add a line laser to show alignment of my blade onto where the cuts are going to be. And this has really sped up my production time, and it really helps me get set up a lot faster. You can see how it lines up on the steel, and you can just slide your scribed line right up to it. I'll show you a closer view here, and you can see exactly what I mean. Makes it a lot easier. You just slide right up, and the width of the laser is exactly the width of my blade. That was one of the handy things of this little line laser that I found. That was just by luck. I wish I could say it was me who did that, but anyway, this has been one of the greatest additions to my chop saw, and you can see it even goes all the way up and lines up with the blade. This was a very inexpensive hack that I did for my cold saw, and I have to say it's probably one of my favorites. And it didn't cost a lot. This little laser, I got a 2-pack from Amazon for I think $8.79. And the little mount that it mounts in is I think $11.99. You can see that I just took a small piece of aluminum angle iron, drilled and tapped it into the side of my saw, and then I ran the wire through a hole right next to it. I ran the wire through the base to the back, where I brought it up through a hole that was already in the housing, and to a battery box that I bought off Amazon. I think it was $6. This laser needs 3 to 5 volts to work, so you can use 3 AA's, or you can use, like I'm using, one 18650 lithium ion battery. So I had a bunch of these laying around from a previous project, so I decided to just go with it because they're rechargeable, and I have a bunch of them. And I'll put links in the description for both the laser, the mount, and the battery box, so that you can find them on Amazon.
Alright guys, so that's it for my cold saw tips and tricks. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you got something out of it. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and the like button and the bell so that you get notified as I come out with more videos. I have a whole bunch of projects in the works, So there should be a lot of content coming out here very soon. If you have any comments or questions, please put them in the comment section and I will answer them. And I would enjoy hearing anything you have to say about my ideas. I thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next video. Thanks.